What is up, guys? Blacklisted Voice episode 44. We're here with our new coach for Blacklisted, Austin Dickson. Austin, how you going?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Kyle?
Not too bad, not too bad. Um, how's coaching been going since Panama?
Things have been good. Kind of getting back into a normal routine. First week, obviously, like taking a week off and then readjusting, like playing schedules and everything. So you're playing that catch-up period from vacation and the Pensacola Beach Bowl and whatnot. But now everything's pretty set in stone, normal routine. So normal sleep for me again.
Yeah. Is that like one of the harder things that you find to like get back on track is the sleep?
Yeah, well, there's just always like, so when we went down there with like programming and just like clients, so there's only so many hours within the day. So like catching up on like client totals and things like that. So at the gym later, which means programming is not getting done until later. And then by the time I know it, it's like, oh, now I got to get up in 5 or 6 hours. So on to bed and then repeating for the first week, 2 weeks. And now this week's back to finally like normal.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. You have a pretty extensive background in kind of like almost mentoring under people.
Yeah.
I know we had started that kind of when I came up there, and was it June for the Granite Games, I think?
Yeah.
And you had mentioned that you had done some kind of like mentoring under Cal Dietz up at University of Minnesota.
Yeah.
What was so how did you get set up with that, and like what was that like?
So got set up, so kind of, I guess, going even further back from there, like during my undergrad years. So I went to Winona State, and then from there interned throughout like my undergrad career. So I mean, I coached at Winona State. My last year, I actually led some like teams. So like they gave like, so we had like different levels of like interns. So like level 3 intern is what I ended up being, and then like I ran like women's golf. So I was actually in control of like that team in itself versus just like being an assistant. So from there, and then I also interned at like St. Mary's University, which is down in Winona as well. And so having like two colleges, kind of the Division 2, Division 3 routes, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to do another internship that's kind of in the same realm. I want to like approach something else. And then my grandparents live close. So I was like, okay, if I can get the University of Minnesota internship, I can live with them because internships are unpaid. So it was like, well, I need a place to live while I'm doing that. And then I can help them out and stuff. So applied, had phone interviews and stuff like that with the director, Sarah Wiley. And then talked with her a few times, and then got the phone call actually when I was up at drill. So I was up at Camp Ripley saying, hey, the internship's yours if you want it. And I was like, I'll be there. So then I think after that phone call, I was there a couple months later. So it was the spring of 2017.
Okay. Sweet. And so like when you say what did you study? What was your undergrad at Winona?
Undergrad was exercise science.
Okay.
So that was my undergrad degree.
Yeah. And then so when you went into internships, that was legit like coaching internships with the strength and conditioning department.
Yep. So when I was at the University of Minnesota, I was part of the Olympic sport intern like staff, because football has its own like thing. Football is so big that they run their own like internships, own strength and conditioning department. So I was under the Olympic strength and conditioning, which covered basically every other sport but football. And so how it worked out, my time at the University of Minnesota was like, there's 3 different facilities: Bierman, Ritter, and then Mariucci. Each of the 3 facilities had different athletes. So like different teams went to each one. And we first cycled through, so it was me and like five other people. So 6 of us. So I was paired up with a guy named Sergio, guy from Texas. Him and I rotated through like the first 2 months of like the internships. You spend a few weeks at each location working with like each strength and conditioning coach. So like Mariucci, for instance, like hockey, swimming, and then Ritter had like basketball, some more like swimming, diving, rowing, and then you'd go to Bierman, which was like baseball, track and field, wrestling, and then cross country and a few other sports as well. And then at the end of that like rotational period, they sit down with us. And so basically all the coaches ranked the interns. And based on your ranking, you got to choose, like, if you were ranked number 1, you got first choice on which coach that you wanted to coach with. Like underneath for the remaining part of that internship.
Okay.
So I guess, I mean, I worked hard my time there, so I got first pick. And then from there, and right away they were like, well, Cal Dietz is out of the question because he's so busy with everything else. But I was like, okay, well, I chose Corey Peterson, which was basically, he kind of worked with Cal with men's hockey, but he was also in charge of like women's soccer and men's swimming. So I was like, well, if I choose Corey, well, then because I'm in Mariucci, I will then be working with Cal as well. I just won't be like addressing Cal personally, or he's not the guy that I'm reporting to, but I will be working with him day to day.
Okay.
Because I wanted to work with Cal, but he wasn't an option. So I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna work with Corey. And then by choosing Corey, I got to work with Cal along the way as well. So I was in Mariucci for my last like 2 months of that like internship period.
Okay. And just to like give some backstory, Cal Dietz is a pretty predominant strength and conditioning coach inside of like the strength and conditioning world, I guess. He's been at the University of Minnesota for, man, I don't even know how many years now.
I mean, he's been like 20 plus years. So he's been there a long time.
Yeah. He's big. He was the creator of Triphasic Training. He's done some work with some military guys with Triphasic. And that's kind of like a big thing that he trains with his, or uses with his athletes. From my understanding, obviously you would have some more info on that.
No, and he uses Triphasic with like each different like athlete, like population and stuff that he works with. And it kind of even like bleeds over because Cal Dietz, very well known, very educated, very like good strength and conditioning coach. Like some of the other coaches at the University of Minnesota start implementing like Triphasic within their own teams too.
Okay.
So wherever we went, we kind of did a little bit, but then in Mariucci, like working specifically with him, it was like full blown like Triphasic, because he's in charge men and women's hockey. That was kind of like his big teams that he worked with and control with and stuff like that. And then he implemented Triphasic throughout like the entirety of the year and just varied it depending on like in season, off season, preseason, everything like that will depend on like what he does. And I know he also worked with a lot of like throwers as well, like professional throwers and stuff like that, guys trying to make it to the Olympics, other things. So seeing some of them like going from like the hockey side, and then you go helping out a thrower who's doing like safety bar split squats with like 800 pounds and everything like that. So it's kind of a nice like spread and like seeing how it's applied in different like ways too, because it's not just like one way, but you can apply it in every movement too. So like, and that's one of the things he talked about. It's not just like your bigger lifts, but you can apply Triphasic training into like more of your like your simple natured lifts, like say a hamstring curl or whatever the case is.
So real quick, could you give it like a brief rundown for those that might not know what Triphasic is?
So working like your different loads when you're under tension. So like you have your eccentric phase where you're like timing a lot of things like going down, and you have like different like varying degrees to where it's like, say like max effort days, you have like your low volume, higher intensity days, and it like varies throughout the week. So you're like training different points on that throughout the week. But you have like your eccentric, then you go into like your isometric. So like you're pausing and everything, and then you go into like your power and speed phases after that. So and all those typically, I mean, depending on the season, depending on the team, I mean, you're looking 3 weeks to a month per block, or you could even shorten it. Say you have like somebody who's injured, but you're going to get them back, then you can go like 2-week blocks with all those. And we even implemented that like my time post, like the University of Minnesota. We went through Triphasics and stuff like that when I was at Velocity, because when I was at Velocity too, I mean, Cal Dietz was a consultant. So like we did a lot of like my time there too. So I mean, I've had a lot of years either working with or working through like Cal and whatnot.
So, can I look here?
What was that?
Sorry, we were breaking up a little bit there. I think
Oh yeah, I was saying you're starting to move in a little slow motion kind of. So
yeah, I think we're good now. I'll pause
okay.
it if that happens. But you were saying that at Velocity, that Velocity was kind of your next job after your internships, correct?
Yep. So yeah, after the internship, Sarah Wiley reached out to me again, probably a few weeks afterwards. And then she was like, hey, there's a job opening at Velocity and stuff like that because they need some help for the summertime. Velocity in itself does a lot of like hockey, strength and conditioning. And so working with Cal Dietz, who is predominantly like hockey at the University of Minnesota, and like consulting and stuff like that through Velocity, it was just basically kind of a lateral shift into that. So we did a lot of like NHL, European pros, AHL, like hockey guys, all their off-season like summer training. So whenever their season would end, depending on if they made playoffs and everything, I mean, we'd have guys go from May until August or September and stuff like that. So, and then we also had a lot of like college athletes. So your D1, D3, like hockey players, and a lot of junior guys too are trying to make it. So that was, I got the call and then went over there and still implementing like your triphasic training principles and everything.
Yeah. So you said there was a difference between like your throwers and like the hockey people using triphasic. What were some of like the big differences that you saw like between those two?
Big differences like with especially like say your throwers. I mean, you're going for like maximum power. I mean, they got their one opportunity to throw their shot put or do whatever event that they're doing. So I mean, they're pushing massive weights because they just need to be as powerful in that like split second that they can. And then like a lot of the hockey guys, not necessarily like as much weight. Yeah, there's some guys that are like insanely strong still, especially in the lower body for some of the hockey guys, but a lot more of that is developing like speed and power and like athleticism versus just like brute like raw strength and power. So doing different drills and different like jumping drills, throwers and stuff like that would still do the jumping drills. So they're being like their joints are like quote unquote like springy, not like squishy and whatnot. But then a lot more of their time is spent like underneath load and everything versus the hockey guys might go into like your safety bar split squat, but then you're going your hurdle hops, then you're going your band assisted jumps, and then you're going like ankle hops, and then going through like sprints. So you're doing almost like French contrast within like the triphasic too.
Okay. French contrast is a lot of assisted lifting for those that don't know. Assisted lifting at above maximal effort, correct?
Yep. Above maximal effort, but then also applying that to like jumps. So you're doing like your say band assisted like squat jumps to where you're jumping way higher than what you naturally can, but then at the bottom the band is actually taking off like tension on your joints because it's making your body weight like 50% at that point, and then you're just creating like overspeed.
Yeah. For some of us, we go from a 20-inch vertical to a 24-inch vertical. For sure. So what were some other kind of like takeaways that you got from working in that internship? Because it sounds like that was kind of like the big base of where your like coaching experience came from, if that makes sense.
Some big takeaways. I'd say the biggest one, and this doesn't even relate to just like coaching or like what I know and things like that, is just like the ability to like work hard and still like basically like wake up early and the day doesn't stop until like all the athletes are done. And kind of like one of the things that was said, Coach Ralph, he was in charge of like women's basketball, strength conditioning, said something one time and it kind of has like stuck with me too. So like, I mean, his basketball girls came in sporadically. They were like paired up because schedule's always in the line. So there was like maybe 10 different groups of 2 that came in throughout the day. And he was just like, well, the same energy that you put in that first group, same energy that you put in that 10th group. Because that 10th group, that's their first session of the day. Right, so like, it's not like you can be like, oh, I've done 10 sessions. I gotta like slack during this point. So like, just like work ethic and like what coaching really is. Because in my time in my undergrad and stuff like that, when I was at Winona, I mean, I'd have like 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. is what I do every day because I have class. I mean, I was a student still at that point. But then at the internship, it was just coaching. I mean, I was there 4:40 in the morning till 5:30 or so at night, and kind of set into my schedule where like, I mean, that's my schedule now, and it seems normal. This wasn't like a shock. But I'd say that was like the biggest thing is like work ethic, but then also like different perspectives on coaching because of the fact that we rotated through. Like every coach is different. And the thing I liked about that and how they rotated us right away. So I worked with like maybe 7 different strength coaches. Like there's things that I like that each of them did, and there's maybe things that I would like change, at least for myself. So like learning how to take a program, but then applying it to like making it my own. I'm not just using a cookie cutter program that someone else did because it works for them. Well, it might not work for this person, so how I'm going to change that and find different ways to do that to work for this individual or this team or this class.
Yeah. So you got a lot of so this is something that I think a lot of CrossFitters are starting to kind of like experience and figure out now, is how each program needs to be varied for the individual. But it sounds like you kind of got that exposure at the collegiate level and at kind of like your internship, the exposure of like, hey, I can take this program and I can tweak it to fit what these individuals' needs are.
Correct. And that's where like a lot of the training principles and like numbers, percentages, movements, things like that, already had a decent base for a lot of those throughout my undergrad, even at like Division II, Division III. But the biggest thing that like I learned was like the application process of a lot of that stuff at my time at the University of Minnesota.
Yeah. Okay. So how did that start to translate over into coaching some of your hockey guys at Velocity and like into some of your kind of personal training clients now?
So going from the University of Minnesota to Velocity was really like I said before, kind of like a lateral shift because it was a lot. I mean, we were training hockey guys and everything at the same level. So I mean, all the college guys were mostly like Division I or like junior guys trying to get onto Division I teams, which was the same clientele that what I had right away at like University of Minnesota. But right away, a big difference. I mean, when I first got in and seeing some of like the bigger name like NHL guys, when I first walked through the doors, I was like, oh, no, I'm training this guy. And it was kind of like right away a little like starstruck. And then like hopping in for like partner drills, or someone needs a partner, and then you're doing like footwork drills or competing against those guys. Right away it was like, oh, this is different. These are like a lot higher level athletes, because I mean, going from even the collegiate setting to the NHL setting is a big jump, right? And that's why not everybody does it. So like clientele wise, very similar, just a little more advanced within some of those like pro guys. But going into Velocity, I mean, we training principles, I mean, very similar. Like a big staple movement, safety bar split squat was something that we did very often. And that was kind of like our tester piece, 4 different loads, different percentages, bar speeds using like Tendo units and everything like that. And then going into like personal training, and like one of the big things like I found out, I guess, kind of like early on is like, we don't have to change like how you train, like say the pro level athlete, and how you train like your general like population. Someone who just wants to get a little stronger, someone who just wants to get a little fitter or anything. You don't change like the mode on how you do it. You just change like the intensity and the degree of what you do. So like some of the other things I would do for the pro guys, I would still do what's, I mean, I had different like mom and dad groups because we did a lot of like youth athletic stuff too. So a lot of the moms or dads would make like a little small group training, and I would do very similar to them than what I do with the pros. But obviously, I'm not pushing as much weight. I'm not moving things fast. So again, it kind of resorts back to almost like application and everything. But yeah, it was very like lateral shift, which made it like easy. So I feel like the internship really set a good like foundation. Yeah. So there's certain things that I'm still learning consistently, but like it wasn't like I went into it with like my first paid job lost in the sauce.
You mean like a weekend certification and then just figure your shit out?
Yeah, exactly.
That was me.
Yeah. And your first time going through, you're like, oh, well, now what do I do?
Yeah. I did try and shadow a little bit, so that was helpful. But yeah, I was definitely like the first 2 to 3 years were just like me figuring shit out. So I think it's cool that you guys like that you can get this base, or you got this base, and like we're able to kind of have a foundation before you headed into like coaching people. So so like this is just like my curiosity, but do you feel like what's the big difference between like the coaches at Velocity and why some of like maybe the NHL guys go to Velocity and the coaches at a collegiate level, and why wouldn't you see NHL guys going over to like collegiate coaches? Does that question kind of make sense?
Yeah. I think some of that, I mean, there's some guys that go back to like where they went to school and whatnot, to train, but at Velocity, I mean, there's another guy, Dan Mines, who I coached with for like the 3 years that I was there. He's no longer there. He actually works for the Philadelphia Flyers organization now and whatnot. So they'd come back. So a lot of what our clientele was, and a reason that they came, was a lot of like Minnesota boys that would come home for the summer. So versus staying out east or out west at like their respective teams during their off season, they want to come home. So a lot of them came in, and we have different like consultants and stuff like that, and people that have been in the NHL who would also like come in and like assist like coach. And we also had like partnerships with different like hockey agencies. So a lot of their like players would come in, train with us, and then a lot of them too, like the retention rate and stuff like that, because of like the work that we did and like the other people and like connections that we had at Velocity, they stuck around like year to year. And then also one of the things of Velocity too. So like I worked for technically like Velocity Hockey Center, but I worked in the facility of Velocity Training Center. So we had our own gym space, turf, indoor field, bars, racks, everything. But then also besides that, we had 2 like smaller like 3-on-3 rinks. So like a lot of these guys would come, they would train with us, but then they'd go and do their ice work at the same time. So we actually had like on ice like coaches, and we had like weight room coaches. So Dan and I were meatheads of the crew, I guess, and then the other guys were your more hockey specific guys. But then also like bouncing ideas off of them. So like we worked.
It was almost more like Velocity specifically. It was almost.
What was that?
Sorry, I think we're breaking up there again.
Yep.
Are we good now?
Yep, I can see you.
Okay, so I guess so. More so, Velocity was like this, like all in one place that you go.
Correct.
Strength conditioning, and right from there you go step on the ice and get the ice time.
Yep. So yeah, we'd work directly with like some of the hockey coaches or their skate coaches, being like, oh, this guy needs to be a little bit faster. This guy's unevenly skating, or this guy's lateral push off is like weak or slow. So we could have like direct feedback from like their on ice stuff, and then their application and like their actual training too.
Okay. Damn, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And we even had like within the facility too, like the training center and the gym, we had 2 big shooting cages. So like a lot of the guys would warm up before their like actual warm up. They'd come in, shoot pucks for a half hour, and then they'd get over to the turf and then start like actually training.
Okay.
We basically had everything for them there, where like going to like traditional gym or something like that, they would have to go to the gym. Well, then they'd have to go find and they'd have to go find a shooting cage. We basically had like all 3 like in one.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So after Velocity, you made the shift over into coaching CrossFit, or?
No, I actually started coaching CrossFit during my time at Velocity. So my wife was actually the one who started in CrossFit. So she at the time, before she moved up to the cities here, she lived in Rochester, and she started CrossFit just to like go to a gym, work out.
What gym was she at in there?
She went to Progression.
Okay, right on.
Yep. So she was at Progression because she was like, oh, I don't know what to do. or anything. So she went there. And then when she moved to the cities, looking for gyms and stuff like that, she went to Mendota, a little closer and whatnot to where we were. And then, so she started coming here. And right away, I was like hesitant because at that time too, there was like the NSCA, like strength conditioning world versus like the CrossFit world. There's like a beef and everything going on.
What year was this?
The beef, I think, started early, like, I don't know, 2012, 2014. But at the time that Samantha came up here was probably like 2018 and stuff like that. So she started here in 2018. But at that point, I had already been like, oh, CrossFit's this, CrossFit's that, and whatnot. So I kind of was like closed-minded to the whole situation. But then she started coming here. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll try it. Like, I'll come in, do whatever. And then after coming in here, tried it a few times, like, oh, I kind of like this. Because one of the things that I like personally enjoyed too, even in my college, like athletic career, was like, yeah, you do your weightlifting, but then I also enjoyed like running or like doing bike intervals, kind of like more of like your monostructural conditioning work. It's something I always enjoyed, which in the strength conditioning world, like, you're kind of having like your big, strong, like meathead coaches, which is the predominant coach, and they're like, oh, my cardio, I might walk for minutes. But I always enjoyed like going on long runs or doing other things as well. So like when I came into like CrossFit, I was like, oh, this is kind of like all encompassing. And I kind of like the fact that like you don't have to be like the great at one specific thing, you just have to be good at everything.
Yeah.
So kind of like started being like, okay, I'm a little more open-minded. Right away, I wasn't really talking about it because I was like, oh, my strength conditioning coaches and stuff like that, I don't know what they're gonna say.
Yeah.
And then so eventually, like, it got to the point where I was like, okay, well, if Samantha's gonna go here and if I want to potentially come with her, well, I work at a gym. I don't really see myself paying for a gym membership if I currently work at a gym that has everything that I need. So I went, got my level 1, and then started kind of like part-time coaching for Mendota and like filling some roles and stuff like that, or open classes. Because first it was to like fiscally or financially like save some money on membership, everything like that. But then eventually like grew into like thoroughly like enjoying it and like kind of making like it made coaching like fun because it was something new for me right away. And with a lot of the hockey guys, like, yeah, working with sports teams, it's great. Like the camaraderie and the team bonding, things like that you get from some of those guys, it's awesome. And like memories that I'll remember forever. But coming into the CrossFit, it's more like positivity, the community, like everybody in this together, like, is what kind of really drew me in to like enjoying it more.
So sorry to break in here, but
no, you're good.
So like you were also in the National Guard,
yes.
medic in the National Guard, correct?
Yep.
So which community do you feel kind of like represents the military a little bit more? Do you kind of feel like the CrossFit community represents the military a little bit more? Do you feel like the sports teams kind of represent that community a little bit more?
I would say probably more of your CrossFit community, because CrossFit community comparative to military community, there's a lot of like people from different walks of life.
Yeah.
Like once you're in like the Division 1 setting or you're in the professional like team setting, you have one like kind of like ideal body type person, everything.
Okay.
Versus like CrossFit, military, you have everything. So it was kind of like it resembled it well. And also too, like within CrossFit, there's a lot of like what I figured out about like hero wads, different meaning behind different things. It kind of hit home a little bit more versus just training somebody to be a little faster or training somebody to be better on the ice. And then going into it like, oh, we're doing this because of this, like say Murph and stuff, for instance, like the meaning behind that workout and like how it's memorialized and everything. And then even further, I mean, this is going kind of a little turn, but then like when I officially kind of like made the switch to make CrossFit the full-time effort, like I kind of had the realization, like I thought of two things. I was like, well, if I want to continue like sports coaching, well, I might have to move out east. I'm gonna have to move out west and like constantly be moving. Like Yeah, the reward is good, but there's also risk. Like if a team has a bad season, well, your job is done. You got to go find a different job.
Yeah.
So, and then also too, like coming over here, I started doing some like personal because there's some people that I really like meshed with. And then like the realization, like if I make some of these elite hockey players like a little bit faster, say 10 years down the road, they're not really going to remember that. Maybe. Yeah. But if I completely like change somebody's life around, whether it's losing weight, building strength, they're able to move how they've never moved before, they're going to remember that. So it kind of had a little more like meaning to it, and it kind of made it a little more like personable versus just the spectacle of like high athletic coaching in a way.
I think one of the cool things about CrossFit right now too is you can get an athlete from, walking into group classes and actually work with them all the way up until they're like very competitive and elite in the sport. And so I think that's kind of like a one unique thing that you have inside of CrossFit versus a lot of these other sports that are, structured at specific levels. Like you have your strength and conditioning coach in middle school, strength and conditioning coach in high school, college, pros, and you're kind of like working your way through a bunch of different coaches. So it is kind of cool to see the progress that people are able to make inside of the, like, even just the sport of CrossFit, not just classes themselves as well.
Well, even in the sport of CrossFit, kind of like you just mentioned, like you could have somebody who just walks in and do a general class at maybe 25 years old. And then, 5-10 years down the road, they're an elite level athlete within the sport of CrossFit. Now, if you want to go to the NHL, well, you're got to start when you're 6 or something. Like you got to start young and continue all the way through. If you want to start when you're 25, the writing's on the wall. Like you're already done if that's your goal.
Yeah. I think the only sport that has that happen where people pick it up late as of right now is football, because you can gain so many athletic skills from other sports that all you really have to do is like learn how to run a route, which is like cutting, which you can pick up from basketball, and catch a ball, which you can pick up from baseball,
Oh yeah, you see that in like a football all the time, to where someone played collegiate basketball, well then they're going into the NFL being a tight end because they're a big body, they're fast, they're strong. Or even like rugby players going into the NFL and stuff like that, because it's a very similar sport. Yeah, there's a lot of different rules and whatnot, but if you're big, you're strong, you're athletic, you're fast, you can fill a role on a football team.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. There's not as much. There is a skill component to it, but it's almost like less than a lot of these other sports. Like you don't have to spend decades swinging a baseball bat to go into the NFL. You kind of like be an athlete and go into the NFL.
Yeah, you gotta. The NFL or football. Yeah, there's a ton of insanely skilled people, but most of it is like, if you're bigger, if you're faster, if you're stronger, you got a spot.
Yeah. Which, it's kind of cool to see that is not the case in CrossFit. Although you are starting to get some of these teens that are training for 10 plus years now, getting into the sport and just absolutely crushing it. So,
you see, I mean, you can see different highlight videos like on Instagram or other things like that of some 16-year-old with an insane clean and jerk. And it's like, I would have never thought to do that when I was 16 years old.
Right. Yeah, right. Like, oh, cool.
Yeah. Which is going to be really cool, like in the future, like of the sport, just to see like the elevation and like where it goes, because there's so much like of a younger population that is now getting into it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like even, I mean, I've been doing it for a decade now, I think, and it's like, I was thinking about this the other day. It's crazy to see how many times the sport has evolved, and like it is still currently evolving right now since I've been in it. Like 4 years ago, I hit use myself an example. 4 years ago, I hit 375-pound front squat for 3, which was like probably top 1% in the sport or higher than that. And Fittest Experience is doing triples for one of their testers right now, and all the top guys are well above that number. And it's like, like they're in the 390s now. It's just like, wow, that is like 15 pounds more than I was hitting, like, as a top 1% in the sport. So
well, and even if you look at like some of the like CrossFit documentaries, movies, things like that, like hearing like Matt Frazier or other people like talking, like, who knows, 5-6 years ago, if you had a 300-pound snatch, you were great. But
Yeah.
now you need a 300-pound snatch to at least be relevant.
Inside of the top 10 at a competition. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. Dudes are getting stronger and stronger and more aerobic. It's fun to watch.
Yeah. Which is nuts. And you never would have thought that was possible. I mean, that guy too, what was it, last year was the first guy to do the whole less than 5-minute mile or 500-pound back squat and like 50 pull-ups.
Yeah, who was that? Adam Klink, I think.
Yep. I think he wasn't he a CrossFit like Krypton guy, I believe, right?
Yep. He was at regionals with Ben the last year, and he won the first 2 events and then just kind of like petered off after that. But yeah, pretty freaking impressive to be able to do that.
Oh, it's nuts. Like in the same day, like 20 years ago, no one would have ever thought something like that was possible.
No. Yeah. So the boundary just keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So what's kind of like next for you here? Like coaching wise, like what are you looking to try and like work on, accomplish?
Coaching wise, and I guess like just professionally wise and stuff like that. So, I mean, Samantha, my wife, and our goal, and something that we've talked about for the last couple of years, and like within the next couple of years, we want to like come to fruition. It's like gym ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So like having a facility, call our own, and everything, and that's so like. So we can do CrossFit, but I also want a facility too, because like this summer started training some of the hockey guys that I used to have at Velocity again. Now the gyms are opening back up, everything, because like 2020 was almost like a wash year across the board. But to where I can have almost like a sports facility within there, but then also combination with CrossFit, so I can kind of like blend the two and like run, organize. That would be like all more of the long-term kind of goal for us. But then also within that, like now coming into like Blacklisted and everything, really like enjoying it, but then also becoming more prevalent and present on like the online programming like platform side of things. So I want like a facility, but then I also want to do things online, because online I feel like I can reach out to like more people versus when you have a facility, you're landlocked. You're how many square miles around that facility.
Right. Yeah, that's like kind of our goal right now, is to get into a facility and create some sort of like online presence, but have the brick and mortar and like work the two, because you can just reach more people that way, and you can provide a better product for people as well. So
yeah, and even just like having that gym space for like informational videos or hosting athlete camps or doing things like that, you have a location versus like trying to find a location in case you ever want to do something.
Right. Yep. It's pretty cool. Well, I know you got some clients coming in here, so, and I've got to take off as well, so we'll end it here. How do people get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me phone, email, or even like Instagram. Instagram is at the.83, I believe. So
do you want me to look it up really quick?
Yeah, I believe that is my handle. My social media game is somewhat weak, and that's something that I need to improve on.
Wait, what did you say it was?
At Dicky.83.
Yep. Okay, you got it right. I thought you said like AG or something like that.
No, 83, and Dicky is Dicky. That was a college nickname that just stuck.
What's your email address?
Austin@blacklistedhq.com.
Sweet. And shout out to Sam for finishing 4th place at Pensacola in the RX division.
RX division, yeah, which was huge because we had no expectations going in, and right away too, like even from say first event, stuck to the game plan, because like she was the last person off the skier, but I was like, don't blow up on the skier, because you need to make sure your bar muscle ups are good, so we don't like, because that's where you can lose a lot of your time. You're going to lose a couple seconds on the skier. Right away she looked around, she almost had that split second where she's like, oh, am I going to panic, or am I just going to keep sticking to the game plan? She stuck to the game plan and finished her heat first, ended up 5th in the workout that she was most nervous for. So and then from the rest of the weekend worked out really great.
That's legit. Great coaching.
Yeah.
So Well, thanks for listening, guys. If you're listening on YouTube or Rumble, make sure you either like or Rumble or whatever that is, and like on YouTube. Subscribe if you guys don't mind. Turn on the notification button. If you guys don't mind also following us on Instagram, blacklisted.hq. We put out some workouts and some coaching content on there as well. If you guys are listening on iTunes or Spotify, make sure you guys give us a follow on YouTube and Instagram as well. So awesome. Thanks again for coming on. It was
thank you, Kyle.
And we'll catch you guys next time.
Awesome. Thanks.